All right, another former TYT on-air personality is running for office. No, it's not me. No, it's not Nina Turner. No, it's not Michael Shore. It's Nomiki Konst, and she's joining us right now. Nomi, how are you?
Good, Cenk. How are you?
Wonderful. All right, so this one is for a Senate district race in New York, the 59th district. So tell us why you decided to run for this.
So I live in the 59th district. I live in Astoria, and Astoria is the heart of the 59th district. It's an interesting district that crosses Astoria, Long Island City, Greenpoint, a little sliver of northern Williamsburg, and a part of Manhattan that includes Kips Bay, Stuyvesant Town, which has a great history, and Gramercy Park, sort of around that area, for those who are familiar. The reason I decided to run is just like a little over a week ago, the New York State maps were finalized after many iterations, and a new district popped up in my neighborhood. And my great Senator Gianaris, who's the deputy leader, has his district was split, and he took the other side, and so the side opened up. And I immediately got phone calls that morning from local community leaders who I've worked with on the ground, who I fought the IDC, the Independent Democratic Conference with, who I fought the MTA when they shut down the MTA subway and put so many small businesses out of commission. We fought Amazon here. They reached out and said, we really need to take on the centrist and have somebody strong who has name ID, who has local support, who's been doing this for a while, who knows how to run a viable campaign in 3 months. And now I have over 40 people in our little committee of local supporters who are actively campaigning to make sure that this district stays progressive, because there's a real chance that a real estate backed, very well-known name could win this district. And it is a progressive district. I mean, people don't know this is the most progressive Senate district in the state, possibly even the country. But it's also a very community-driven district. People are very involved in their community boards. They're very involved in the land trust. They're very involved in fighting off innovative queens. There are clubs, there are organizations, there are 30th Avenue business associations and Broadway business associations that are involved. Moms. This is like, old school New York in a Senate district, and folks really want to make sure that we are able to keep our rents low. We stop this speculative market. Long Island City is the fastest growing city in America. It's a bunch of expensive glass towers that no one lives in that are affecting the livelihoods of the largest public housing in the country at Queensbridge Housing. It is really the tale of two cities, as cliche as that's become. It truly is. You can see it outside right in front of your faces. It's the epitome of how real estate's taking control of the city.
So Nomiki, there's a couple of states where at the state level, very interesting things are happening between progressives and the establishment wing of the Democratic Party. Oregon's one of those states where the progressive takeover made a big difference, and Jamie McLeod Skinner wound up winning the congressional seat at the federal level because of the state takeover. And so in New York, you have one of those as well. So for people unfamiliar with the fake Democrats that Andrew Cuomo used to control and how they were defeated, can you tell us about that so people can catch up on why the state level in New York is so important?
Well, I have to give credit to you, if I can, Cenk, because you were actually a very big part of this. TYT was a big part of it. When no one was covering the Independent Democratic Conference soon after, they've been around for over a decade. There were 8 Democrats in the Senate who were caucusing with Republicans, even though they were representing overly Democratic districts. And I know you remember, Cenk, but late 2016, early 2017, we were like, hey, this is a big deal. People are paying attention to what's happening locally. We want to raise awareness. And you sent me out to report on this, others to go out and report on this. You did it on the main show. And as a result, so many activists in New York became really angered and showed up at the protests and pressured and exposed a lot of these fake Democrats, so much so that the very strong candidates that were running against them, those who had been part of their communities, who had organized, were able to defeat the IDC. And it was incredible, and it changed everything in the legislature. Now we have a truly democratic legislature, Senate in particular, and the Senate could potentially, it could stay progressive. It's definitely going to stay democratic, but it doesn't mean it's going to stay progressive. our district is extremely progressive, and it could be a little bit more conservative. And it's why I think a lot of folks have said, we need to make sure our community is preserved. We have someone from the community who understands the issues, who knows what it's like to fight at the state level, who knows what it's like to run for office, who's tested, experienced, understands the issues, knows the deep-seated needs of this community and the state, and also the implications, as you said, on the nation. You can't pass a lot right now. Congress is frozen. They're completely, unfortunately, because of the systemic issues that Congress and the Senate face, they're not able to get a lot of things done. In California, they can. In New York, we have a really progressive Senate that we need to keep progressive, because we just started to do things like codify Roe v. Wade. This session, just a couple days ago, we were able to expand some of our already pretty strict gun regulations, but there's a lot more to do. We have to pass the New York Health Act. We're only a few votes away. And beyond that, we need to expand much more access to make sure that our healthcare system is racially and genderly just. I mean, it's still weak in terms of research, in terms of accountability of doctors, making sure that they give the same proper access to people in communities that may not necessarily have access to the most wealthy doctors or the best doctors in the country.
So Nomiki was a huge part of covering the IDC, and IDC was the original Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, but at the state level in New York.
Exactly.
And so just Trojan horse within the Democratic Party to allow corporate donors to do whatever they wanted, and they were decimated by progressives in New York, which is wonderful. Just when you gave me credit for it, I was taken aback because no one ever gives me credit for anything. So I was like kind of surprised on it.
I remember pitching you, and you were like, "Go for it." Yeah. And no one. I mean, I say this. I'm not trying to, make you feel great, but I know that we were pitching on the side media, in the centrist media, and they weren't having it. They picked up on it later. But it really started with you guys, and that makes a huge difference. I mean, our entire livelihoods are shifted because the IDC was defeated, and a big part of that was exposing it and letting activists know that there was this issue. So I do thank you for that as a New Yorker, not just a former TYT employee.
No, I appreciate that, but it's absolutely true that it was Nomi's idea in the first place to focus on that, and that's why it matters to have someone who's been in the fight for a long time, has seen these things develop, and has helped to put a spotlight on the bad guys, help defeat them, etc. So Nomi, let me go back to what's going on in New York, because in California, we have a supermajority of Democrats, but we still can't pass things like single payer health care and so many other things that California is, the voters themselves are massively progressive according to the polling, but we can't get most of the things that we want passed because, again, as always, the corporate donors. So in New York, for example, you mentioned the New York Health Act. Tell us a little bit more about that. What would that do, and why is that important to pass? And I know you need more progressives, not just more Democrats, to pass it.
Well, luckily our leadership, and I think this is the difference between our leadership in New York than California. Our leadership is actually very progressive in the Senate. We have Senator Andre Stewart Cousins, who's been a great leader. My former senator, he's now in a different district, and now I'm in a open district. Senator Janaris has been a very strong leader. We have Gustavo Rivera, who is the carrier of the New York Health Act in the Senate, and Dick Godfrey, Assembly member, who has been an advocate for this for decades. We are now at a point where we could pass that if we have the political will. But beyond that, I mean, let's not forget, and where I live in particular in Queens, in Northwest Queens, we were ravaged by COVID. I mean, outside of my apartment, just a couple blocks away, you had a hospital in which there were body bags being placed in trucks outside the hospital during COVID. And we are pretending like this, number one, doesn't still exist. Almost 70,000 New Yorkers have died of COVID. We are pretending as if the pandemic is over and no pandemic relief is needed. We just hit another COVID surge here. Maybe people who have been vaccinated and boosted are not dying, but they still have to leave work. I know at least 5 or 6 friends right now who are home with their kids, not able to work, who still have to worry about paying their rent, some people who still haven't been able to pay off their rent from the first shutdown and won't have pandemic relief for that rent. In the meantime, we have a mayor who's talking about raising rent stabilized apartment rent. I live in a rent stabilized apartment. I can barely afford to live here right now. And they're gonna talk about raising the rents at this time when income inequality before COVID was the worst it's ever been. So we have a set of issues that, there's been a backlog of issues that have not been addressed. And now that we have a Democratic legislature, we really have to speed up that backlog, which they've been doing, especially now that Andrew Cuomo's not the governor. But we have yet to address the real systemic issues that led to this crisis with COVID, the economic barriers, the economic problems, the housing issues that we already faced as a city that were exacerbated with this pandemic, and now are going to be much, much worse. And real estate and other big industries are just coming in and saying, this is an opportunity, disaster capitalism. We're gonna take advantage of those who can't afford to live in their apartments anymore. We're gonna push them out, renovate those apartments, build high rises, and create speculative markets. It's not healthy, it's not safe, it's not good for New Yorkers, it's not good for anywhere in this country. And to make it global, New York is also a place where a lot of oligarchs are placing their money. So the fact that this pandemic and our lack of response to a health crisis, which has hurt so many New Yorkers, health-wise, livelihood-wise, economically, housing, it is being taken advantage of by people who want to hide their money. We really, as a legislature, need to crack down on this. And so we may not have a California issue, but we have a backlog, and we need to make sure that we have aggressive, independent progressives who are not beholden to special interests. This is ultimately it. We have a progressive legislature, so there are a lot of folks who are trying to chime in and make sure their agendas are pushed. That's not the case with me, as you know. That's not the case with some of my allies, like Senator Rivera, who's in the Bronx right now fighting off the Bronx machine, and others who've been doing this for a long time. We have an opportunity, not just for New Yorkers, but for the rest of the country, to make sure that we pass some legislation that will really solve these real disparaging issues that have been exacerbated by the pandemic.
All right. The website's nomikifornewyork.com, nomikiforny.com. Candidate for New York's 59th Senate district, and we just explained to you why that's so important, not just for New York, but for the whole country. Nomi, thank you for joining us again. Thank you for running again.
Thank you, Cenk. August 23rd, guys, that's the date of the election. Come volunteer if you can. It's a huge deal. It's a 3-month-long campaign, and very important, communities matter. The community really wants to make sure that they have somebody from the district who understands the issues, because it is, like we said, the largest public housing in the country is in this community. They need someone who understands what's happening so that these big developers in Long Island City aren't completely taking advantage of the income inequality, especially post-COVID. So I thank you, Cenk. I thank everybody else, TYT family, TYT Army.
All right, thanks, Nomi.